week. Among them is the Chinese President Xi Jinping. But he's being urged not to soften, well, Rishi Sunak's being urged not to soften Britain's stance against the communist superpower. So far, Sunak hasn't committed to designating China a threat to the UK. Now, David, Liz Truss talked a good game when it came to China. She wanted to upgrade their status, as it were, to a threat rather than, I can't remember what the term is, a systemic competitor or something like that. So she wanted to up the ante. Sunak seems to be dialing that down. Is he right to?
I think Sunak is really, as Britain so often does in foreign relations, just following on America's coattails, even when the coat is worn by the less than distinguished President Biden. You saw Biden deliberately shaking hands with Xi, and again a dialing down of the rhetoric. I think the truth is that not much will change, because the consequence of the Ukraine war has been fundamentally a huge visible realignment in world politics. Russia and China and their hangers on like North Korea and whatever are now manifestly an effectively united bloc. The West, that's America, the old British Empire. Europe is a rather uneven hanger-on. You know, the French have always played funny games about being a kind of pig-in-the-middle power. But there's the West. There's this now totalitarian bloc. And then, of course, there's exactly the group that they're meeting, the G20. And what's very striking is how few members of the G20, that's Indonesia, where they are, it's Brazil, it's South Africa, it's India, how very few members have wholeheartedly supported sanctions against Russia or the West. In other words, the rest of the world, you know what? They're standing watching. They're looking at China, they're looking at the West, and they're thinking, whom can we get the most from? We have this bizarre notion of a policy, foreign policy of principle. We're fools. And we've been taken with fools, and we've been treated as fools.
Do you think that's true, Peter? Are we being taken for fools? Should we be like other third-party countries and be a little more diplomatic and not not judge, not be seen to judge other countries? Or do we need to take a strong stance when it comes to upholding liberal democratic values?
I think there's a place for values in foreign policy now more than ever. And of course, Britain has to be humble and mindful about its own shortcomings. But surely the events in Ukraine of the last 12 months show why values are more important than ever before. You're going to China, Rishi Sunak's downgraded, if you like, Liz Truss's rhetoric from a pure threat to an economic rival or threat. But China is doing some very nasty things, including putting Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps, which is truly incredible in the 21st century that we're even using phrases like concentration camps. And there's worry about what China will do next. Here's a phrase you won't hear this week in Bali from China: we will not invade Taiwan. We know why they won't say it, because either they will do it, or they won't, but they like hanging the threat over other people.
But I guess the reality is it not, David, that we are just totally dependent on China, and therefore there's only so much we can do in terms of trying to influence the way they behave domestically and on the in terms of geopolitics?
What I'm hoping is that two things have happened, and I think they seem bad on the one hand. I think their consequences are very good. The fundamental thing is that Xi has blown the Chinese economic miracle. Xi's invocation of COVID restrictions on the one hand and the extraordinary cutback on commercial freedom in China on the other is meaning that the thing that I most feared, and I share everything that Peter was saying about the horror of China. It's simply the question of how we deal with it. My great fear was that the efficiency of China. Remember, China isn't run by a collection of Oxford PPE failures. China is run by serious engineers, which is why it's done what it is. My great fear was that you were going to be able to combine originality and creativity economically and culturally with authoritarianism. If you can do that, we are lost. The formula I came up with at the beginning of the COVID crisis was get COVID, get a Chinese virus, finish with a Chinese society. And this is the terrible threat to us. The question is, how do we deal with it? I don't think posturing is the way you deal with it. We've also learned the problem of posturing with Russia. Do you remember we thought, wasn't it going to be easy? All we need to do is stop importing oil and gas from Russia and Russia will collapse. This huge power will crumble. And do you know what? It was like standing on one end of a rake and you were smacked by it.
Yeah, they just reorientated themselves.
And they said, where did they send them? Where did they send their gas and oil to? China and India, who bought it prodigiously. And, sorry? So we've, again, this business of, yes, of course, Peter is right. Yes, the concentration camps are disgusting. Yes, the threat to Taiwan is shocking. What are we going to do about it?
But I must
what
say,
can we realistically do? The answer is nothing apart from disengagement.
Well, this is what it seems that Rishi Sunak has found out, because just looking at what has been said back in July, when, of course, he was trying out for leader of the party for the first time, when he didn't win to Liz Truss, he was talking very tough indeed. He said China is Britain's biggest long-term threat. He's right. That they represent the largest threat to Britain, accused China of stealing our technology and penetrating our university. He said they're propping up Putin's fascist invasion of Ukraine by buying his oil, attempting to bully their neighbours, including Taiwan. Now that he's Prime Minister, understanding the realpolitik, I guess, understanding the virtues or necessity of diplomacy, he's had to dial that down slightly. But do you think we need to get tougher on China, or do you think that actually there isn't a hell of a lot we can do?